Good afternoon and welcome to the PWGC Environmental Echo. I'm your host, Paul Boyce, the President and CEO of PWGC. Today we've got a really interesting topic. It's a topic I've had many of our listeners reach out, and some of my staff and family members and friends, people that know me and that know this project, have reached out to me to say, hey, why don't you do a podcast on this? And I was very, very fortunate to get a couple of guests to do this topic. The topic is St. Patrick's Cathedral. Not only just the geothermal portion that a lot of people are interested in, but we'd like to talk a little bit about the renovation work. And our guest today, I've got the lead architect, Jeff Murphy of Murphy, Burnham, and Buttrick. He's owner and principal of the firm. And I also have Tom Newbold of Landmark Facilities Group, the mechanical engineer that worked on the project as well as PWGC on the geothermal portion. So the project took place a few years ago. Was completed, probably 2015, 2016, in that era. It was a renovation of a national historic landmark and a city landmark. So it was a pretty high-profile project. Jeff, if you don't mind starting off, would you just tell us a little bit about the renovation? What was involved, how it all came about? Obviously it was a very old cathedral, and it was definitely time to not just put a fresh coat of paint on it, but get it back to what it once was.
Well, Paul, thank you. It's nice to be here, and especially nice to be on this podcast with you and Tom, who were both really integral to the geothermal project. We actually, believe it or not, interviewed for this project back in 2005, and we got the project in 2006, and it came about because then Cardinal Egan noticed a crack in one of the columns on the inside of the building and said, we should probably look into that. And some wonderful trustee named Tom Scarangello, who's the chairman of Thornton Tomasetti, suggested that they do a needs assessment. And we interviewed with this 30-person team for the needs assessment. And over the next 5 or 6 months, we produced a big, thick document that outlined, all the challenges in that building. The building really hadn't been renovated since the 1940s, and all of the systems there were shot. And so we did this needs assessment thinking that it would sit on the shelf for a couple or 3 years, and 2 weeks later, we got a call saying, when can you start this project? And so we were our jaws, after we picked up our jaws off the ground, we jumped into doing this project. And it turned out to be a comprehensive project where we addressed, we basically touched every surface in that building, both restoration, new projects, and a complete systems overhaul, and that's where the geothermal system came into play, and we got involved with you guys in developing this system.
So Tom, how did you get involved? Jeff just mentioned the the mechanical systems and the geothermal. What drew you to the project?
Well, we had a relationship with MBB that was ongoing, and they invited us to be a part of the team. So that was how we got involved. But what was interesting is that the project didn't start out as a geothermal project. It was originally going to be a conventional air-cooled chiller system, and it was going to be installed in a vault on the south side of the cathedral, with huge subway grading vents to allow the heat rejection. And we were going to continue with the Con Ed steam for heat. And once the prices started coming in for doing this excavation, it was so astronomically high that we were asked to look at other alternatives for ways to heat and cool the cathedral. And there were a couple of different scenarios we looked at, and the one that I always found most interesting was that we actually investigated the feasibility of tunneling under Fifth Avenue and buying chilled water and hot water from Rockefeller Center. But in the end, after doing a number of life cycle cost analysis and owning and operating analysis, we discovered that the geothermal system would actually be the most economical solution, and it also happened to align nicely with the Archdiocese interest in having being good stewards of the climate. So
that part I do remember specifically being mentioned to me as when we got involved as the geothermal engineer. So that was and we fully support that and stood behind that. So you mentioned some of the bigger.
Paul, I would just add to what Tom was saying. When we started this project, we saw a lot of reasons to look at geothermal technology, and the biggest thing having to do with the fact that the system really has so little impact on the historic fabric of the church. And not only that, when we did initially speak to LFG, it was clear that there was a way, even though it was going to be challenging, to integrate the system on the interior of the building into existing spaces, including radiator enclosures and so forth. And we actually presented this to the client way back in maybe 2007, but geothermal technology in Manhattan really just did not have a great track record. It was being used at the Union Theological Seminary and the General Theological Seminary, and we just didn't have enough data to sort of sell to this very conservative institution. They wanted sort of a sure thing, and geothermal technology in Manhattan, I think at that point, still wasn't established, still hadn't had enough years of use in the city. And so we sort of set that aside, and as Tom said, we designed what we referred to as a conventional plant for this project, which as he clearly pointed out, had a lot of challenges in terms of what it did to the campus of St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Oh, that's for sure. I remember it well. So, we talked about some of these bigger, elements or aspects of the project, and I know the full renovation had a construction budget of, several $100 million, if I'm not mistaken. Do you guys recall what?
$1 million.
183. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, and I was there many times during construction, watching the inside work, the outside work, as well as the geothermal work, as we were responsible for. But the stuff that was going on, the question we had is who established, how much to spend? Did the Archdiocese say, we've got this much, make it work? Or did you guys say it's going to cost this much? How did that all work out?
I think we sort of backed into that budget, and we were working very closely with Zubakin, which is an owner's rep, and also Structure Tone. And we had an amazing cost estimator, Chris Slocum. And from the very beginning of this project, we started cost estimating. And so even with that initial needs assessment, we started throwing numbers at what this project could cost, and just worked with Structure Tone, whose numbers were then reconciled with Chris Slocum's, to really develop a budget. And remarkably, we ended up really keeping an eye on the numbers and coming in within budget on this project. And I think Structure Tone did a masterful job of managing our budget and making sure that we had enough money to build this thing. And it's funny, I was just looking at the numbers for the geothermal plant. In 2010, we estimated that system could cost around $25 million. In 2013, when we finished the schematic design, we costed the project ended up coming in $22 million and change. And the final contract amount was at about $24 million. So we were really on the mark with our budgeting. And I think the success of the project and also being able to bring it in at cost, at what it needed to be, I think really gave the client confidence in our team and in the system itself. And so the adage of say what you're going to do and then do it is important. And I think we as a team, all benefited from the fact that we were able to produce what we said we were going to do.
It was
Yep.
phenomenal, and I was unaware that the geothermal system, all in with the plant and everything else, cost that much, almost a little over 10% of the entire budget. So that's saying something. Tom, let me ask you, when we're talking about numbers, the energy savings or efficiency. What did you guys estimate this would save annually in terms of dollars for the cathedral? And follow-up question to that will be: has anyone been monitoring that since it's gone into use?
Yeah, I think Jeff, maybe you can help me out here, but I think we came in around. We were estimating around a 30% reduction in energy, and I don't remember how many pounds of CO2, but we also did that analysis as well just to see, what we were going to be, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But it was pretty significant.
Yeah, I think, we went through the world financial crisis came along, and it gave us a little bit of a breather in this project. And Tom had described looking at the conventional plant, comparing that with geothermal, and comparing it with what we were calling the rock center option, which was taking chilled water from their plant across the street. And we very generously, Rob Spire from Tickman Spire, lent us their engineers, and Tom remembers this well, and maybe you do, Paul, of all sitting over at Rockefeller Center and brainstorming about these three systems and what was the best fit for St. Patrick's Cathedral. And what Tom's analysis really proved out was that really in the short term, there were some costs that might have exceeded what the other systems would have cost, but in the medium and long term, the geothermal system was going to save the cathedral money, and on top of that, be more sustainable. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of things like the amount of rock we had on site and would have had to excavate for the other two systems really made geothermal make a lot of sense. And I love the system for St. Patrick's. I'm not sure I would apply it to every single project that I've ever been on. There has to be a right fit and a right reason to do it. And it's also a system that requires maintenance, and not every small institution has the ability to maintain a system like this one. And so, there has to be the right fit for this particular system.
I would clarify on that in terms of, because of the limited space that we had for a ground loop, we went with an open loop system, which does require more maintenance. But for smaller facilities that have a little more land, we would look at using a closed loop instead of a standing column well system. So the maintenance for a closed loop system is certainly comparable, if not less, than what you would see for a conventional air conditioning system with air-cooled condensers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it's all good stuff. What I'd like to ask both of you guys, is, and we started off by saying this is, it's a local, it's a New York City landmark, it's a national historic landmark. You go international, people have heard of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. I mean, it's, this is it was a super high profile project. I mean, for PWGC, that was, this was at the top of our list. I mean, we were very fortunate, and, to use the term blessed for the cathedral, we were blessed to work on this project. What was it like, for both of you guys to work on such a high profile project? I mean, there's tons of constraints, being that it's a national landmark. You've got to work within those constraints. How did that go into helping choose a geothermal system? But the big thing is the just highly visible, high profile. Towards the end of the project, or at least the construction portions, we were racing to get things buttoned up because it was a high profile guest coming for a very important visit, which was well received and very hugely successful as far as I was concerned. But what were you guys' thoughts on just working on such a majestic and high profile project?
Well, I know from our perspective, it was extremely exciting, but it was also terrifying at times, because you know that if you screwed this one up, you're never going to hear the end of it. So we really relied heavily on using a team approach here. I think between us and Jeff, and of course your office, we made sure that this project was going to be a success.
Yeah, for us, I would just say it was an extreme privilege to work on this project, and we had this really inspired client who wanted a good project, and they answered to a lot of people, and they wanted quality, and so that was just an amazing opportunity to work under those kinds of conditions. Everything from everyone from our client to our team. We had 20 people on the 20 firms on the design team. We had stained glass specialists from England on this project. We had this very diverse, very, very involved team. We had an amazing client team. The clergy and Cardinal Egan and then Cardinal Dolan and Monsignor Ritchie and Monsignor Monsignor Musticello, who all were involved in this project. Guys like Tom Scarangello, who I mentioned was the trustee, and Zubatkin as an owner's rep. So we had this amazing team, everyone bringing their A game to this project. And then you had Structure Tone and all of Structure Tone's subs and workers and laborers, and it was just everybody trying to pull at the same time and do their best work. One of the nicest things that our client did for us, Cardinal Dolan, had barbecues for us. Not just one, and he was flipping burgers out there. And so, we had this client that really showed their appreciation to the design team and to the workers. And, I've never really been on a project like that. And then the other thing that's just so wonderful is that people remember this building, what it was like before, when we arrived on the scene, stone, they had to cordon off parts of the building because pieces of mortar and small pieces of stone were falling on the sidewalk. The building was kind of blackish. The interior was this kind of army green inside. And, it was just a filthy mess. And, a lot of people hadn't at the time, realized that St. Patrick's was in need of some real stewardship. But, I think after the project was done, it became apparent how much better and how much more beautiful the architecture was, because it was just cleaned up and looking gorgeous. So anyway, it was a project of a lifetime with amazing people involved in the project, and it's something that obviously I'll never forget as an architect.
Yeah, well, Jeff, well said. I agree 100%. And we were out there too, and most of our work, if not, I'd say 90% of our work was outside, in the ground, and it was just on a sidewalk in Manhattan. What we were trying to do, it was just the constraints and just getting the job done and getting it done on time. It was quite an undertaking, which leads me to my next question. is throughout the entire renovation and construction work, this remained an active cathedral. I mean, I remember times, we were drilling wells on both sides of the cathedral, 51st Street and 50th. And, me being the lazy engineer that I am, instead of walking around, I'd walk through, and, sure enough, it wasn't a mass or a service going on, but there were church activities going on. People were in pews, and, there's scaffolding set up, and there's construction workers, everywhere. And, what was it like for you guys to work on a site like that? That, number one, we had a job to do, but number two, it had to remain an active, cathedral for, services and masses and everything else that they were doing in there.
From our perspective, I mean, obviously because the original heating system for the cathedral was a steam heating system, and because we were changing to geothermal, that involved replacing all the radiators with fan coil units, which of course made a lot of work for Jeff's team in terms of having to design new enclosures for these things. But we had to spend a lot of time in the cathedral trying to, inspect the workmanship, as these things were being installed. And, it was always interesting kind of having an audience of people that were curious about what we were up to. We would go beyond the barriers, and they would want to see what we were going to do. So.
Yeah, I would say, that whole choreography of how the work happened in this big space really was coordinated with Zubakin and Structure Tone's plans for how they were going to get this building restored and renovated. And really the clergy just really putting up with a lot and accepting the fact that they were going to have a construction project going on. And I think what was so cool about how it came about was I think leadership, and certainly Cardinal Dolan recognized that, if you go to Rome, there's always a project going on in churches and all over the city. And, so they sort of embraced this, and they talked about the project as a rejuvenation, aligning it with sort of spiritual rejuvenation. And they just went with it. And we have some beautiful images of like midnight mass one year where everyone's sitting under scaffolding. And, at first I think they were concerned that people would be upset about that, but people just embraced it and loved being in a building that was under construction. One of the coolest things that I can remember is just being up on the scaffolding and looking at stained glass, and all of a sudden the choir started practicing, during work hours, and it was just totally sublime. So the combination of them going on with the business of operating a church and doing all those things, and allowing people in to see the construction, and allowing us to sort of, as Tom was saying, interact with people on a certain level, and that was just a really remarkable part of this project that doesn't happen all the time. We're working right now down in Trinity, and they closed Trinity Church Wall Street, and they closed the church, and it was the smartest thing to do for that particular church, because it didn't have the territory that St. Patrick's did. But it is kind of a shame that people didn't get to see all the amazing things that went on during that construction project.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've read that pre-pandemic, the cathedral was drawing 5 million plus visitors a year, which, think about that. We've all done dozens, hundreds, whatever jobs, construction jobs. Having 5 million people show up to your site in a year, I mean, it's unheard of. The fact that we could do this, keep everybody safe, keep everybody reasonably happy, and get the job done. It really is a testament to the team. Like you said, Structure Tone, those guys were phenomenal. I can't speak highly enough of them. I enjoyed working with the Zubatkin guys, the owner's rep as well. and all the other, trades and disciplines that we got to work with and interact with. So, being that this was, in my mind, this was a huge success, this project. It's up, it's running, it's heating, it's cooling. We're not bleeding any water. We won't get into the whole technical information on that to overwhelm some of our listeners and people that are trying to enjoy the podcast. But so the system's working pretty well. We were hooked up to the BMS for a few years post, and we were seeing some of the performance and how it was operating and how it was operated. We've since, been terminated from that as the job's done and complete, and hopefully still working nicely. As you mentioned, the maintenance, ongoing maintenance issues, could be water quality, the mechanical equipment. But as a group, we've been able to really, parlay this into a good success for ourselves. And, do you guys see this translating into other projects in New York City, particularly in Manhattan? And Jeff, you mentioned another church down, Trinity. What other applications could you see for a technology like this, in New York City?
I think certainly other institutions with campuses are, I know, for instance, Columbia University is in Manhattanville, is using this technology. And we just did an assessment, greening assessment for the Riverside Church up near Upper West Side, up near Columbia. And, they're interested in this technology. We gave them a tour of the St. Patrick's plant. So, I think there's definitely an interest. I think, as I said before, there has to be a good fit between the institution, the context, and the natural conditions, and the technology. So if I'm working with a small little church somewhere, it might not be the first technology I go to. But we're thinking a lot about how we can work with buildings and make them more sustainable in any event. I mean, we're doing our best to insulate buildings and address fabric. We're very much involved in passive house design, where it's really an idea about really making a tighter envelope, a more efficient envelope. And so I think more and more, what's great about projects like St. Patrick's Cathedral is that more and more, institutions that know they're going to be around for the next 100 or 200 years will think about, these projects that can be more sustainable and that can maybe cost a little bit more, but really, if they're taking the long view, they can make a lot of sense. And so, I think you'll see more and more of this moving into the future.
Mm.
Absolutely hope so.
I would say that with local laws in New York City, like Local Law 97, it's really pushing more and more buildings to electrify and get away from, having their own boilers and other sources of greenhouse gases. And so that makes geothermal really a natural fit to do that. So I think the technology is really got a bright future in New York.
So yeah, Tom, what about the the mechanical room and down there underneath the cathedral? I've been down there many times. We have 10 wells, I believe 6 on one side, 4 on the other side of the cathedral, and they all come back to a central mechanical room, and there's 10 heat exchangers down there. Now, they're not overly large or anything, but that room is packed. I mean, is this a compact technology? Would so if we were going to retrofit another facility that's maybe smaller, would this be applicable? I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, again, going back to the original design of having an air-cooled system, the mechanical room that we were going to have to build was going to be quite sizable. And what we discovered when we started looking at the geothermal option was we were able to repurpose existing space in the cathedral. So we didn't really do any new construction, add any square footage to the building complex to be able to accommodate this the geothermal plant. And I think when you looked at the savings of not having to excavate the new mechanical plant, and compared that to the cost of the well drilling, that the well drilling option was actually less expensive than the excavation would have, the cost of doing that. But the mechanical space was very tight. We kind of looked at that as if we were designing a submarine. We made use of
Yeah.
of the entire volume. It wasn't just square footage, but we were making use of the volume as well.
Tom, you guys did a great job, because you you can't swing the dead cat in there without hitting something, as they say. I mean, it was efficiently used. Let me put it that way. It is not a square inch that went to waste, for sure. Like I said,
I would say that Tom's used to getting beat up by architects, who want more of their space. And what was so great, Tom's really on the mark. I mean, we saved a lot of money by not building this larger plant. That Tom, I'm guessing that the conventional plant was going to be about 40% bigger, and we were able to go back into the original mechanical space, put the geothermal plant in there, and actually have space left over from their original mechanical space for that we could turn over to them for their back of house uses. So it ended up being a very compact system. I think Lane ended up doing most of the installation. I actually think the plan is beautiful, and that was our charge to Tom. We wanted it to be tight, but we wanted it to be beautiful, and all of the pipes line up perfectly, and all of the heat exchangers line up perfectly, and you go into that plant, and it's impressive. It looks great, and Tom. We owe a lot to Tom and his team for really taking the care to make this plant quite beautiful, and also I think because it's so well organized, it's easy to understand the technology a little bit better. And we always knew that we wanted to use, the client was very interested in using this project as sort of a demonstration project. And we've had NYSERDA and other institutions and lots of architects down into and engineers down into that space. And, it's a great educational opportunity to show people the system and have them understand the benefits of it.
Jeff, you're right. I mean, I actually was on a tour down there, or giving part of the tour to the Department of Design and Construction of New York City. They're very active in pursuing geothermal opportunities for many of the city facilities. So this was for them, it was a great case study, or a place to educate themselves and see where they could apply it for future projects. So to try to bring this thing to a close, I did mention we had a special visitor towards the end of the construction. It was Pope Francis. I think it was back in 2015, if my memory serves. What were his thoughts? Anybody, you get any feedback from the Pope? Was he impressed with the renovation work? And did he have anything to say about the geothermal system?
I can't speak to that. I know that everybody was extremely enthusiastic about him coming, and in fact, knowing he was coming was a real catalyst for getting a piece of that project completed. We were just pulling out the stops, and Structure Tone and their subs were just going crazy towards the date of his visit. But one of the things that perhaps inspired this client was that Pope Francis came out with his encyclic, which basically stated that we as people need to be better stewards of the earth. And I think that maybe had an impact on this, because shortly thereafter we were designing a geothermal plant. And I think it just the Catholic Church, by doing this project, really set a high bar for other institutions, other religious institutions. And, they really deserve to be commended for sort of being out there in the forefront of sustainability and this high level of stewardship of their building.
Jeff, I agree. It's phenomenal. Tom, anything to add?
Well, I was going to say, sort of reinforcing what Jeff was saying earlier about, just a great client to be able to work with, and the fact that they invited the entire design and construction team to stand on the steps of, the cathedral as the Pope arrived. And I think the high point for me was when somebody whispered in the Pope's ear and sort of pointed in our direction, and he threw us a wave and a little blessing. And so, I was just really touched by that. So.
Very cool. Yeah, I know PWGC, we had a couple of staff members out there that day, waiting for his arrival, and the same thing. They felt it was incredibly special and, again, a blessing to be there. So that's terrific. Any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't cover that you guys want to mention about the cathedral, the renovation, the geothermal system?
Well, I would just again say thank you to you, Paul, and your team, John Reiner, everybody who helped make this happen, and also to Tom and Rustilio and Eleanor and all of the folks on both of your teams who really contributed to this project. And it is one of those special things that we all shared, and I know we'll all remember it, but it'll also be nice to take this experience elsewhere and to work with other institutions and bring this kind of project to other situations. So I look forward to working with both of you guys in the future.
Same here. Tom?
Absolutely. Yep. A lot of credit needs to go to the contracting team. When we talk about the mechanical room, and it's nice that Landmark Facilities is getting credit for the design, but it was really the attention to detail on the part of Lane and the other contractors to again to make it all fit, and they had the same charge, and they understood it, which was that this was really going to be a showpiece, and it needs to be a real model that we can show other people, and I think they succeeded in that hands down. So.
No question about it. I mean, it was, again, I'll say it again, the project was a huge success. It's nationally, internationally recognized facility, and it's all the better for the work that the team did. And I am also grateful, to the owner, to the owner's rep, the Structure Tone, to Jeff for bringing us in. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'll never forget it. So, and Tom, also working with you and Rich, it was an experience I will remember for the rest of my life. So I want to thank you guys. Again, our guest today on the PWGC Environmental Echo podcast, we had Jeff Murphy from Murphy, Burnham, and Buttrick, the lead architect on the St. Patrick's renovation project. And we also had Tom Newbold from Landmark Facilities Group, which was the mechanical engineer that did the large part of all the design work there for the heating and cooling systems. And you also had myself, PWGC, Paul Boyce, President and CEO, your host for the podcast. So just for our listeners, if you guys have any questions or you have any further interest in the project or the work we did, feel free to reach out to us at www.pwgrosser.com/podcast. And I just want to thank you for listening today, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much.